Shadow Moon, while being in prison, is counting the days until his release. He calls his lovely wife because he is tormented by vague premonitions, and she assures him that she's waiting for him. His best friend, Robbie, helps him organize a party to celebrate his return. However, 2 days before his release, the warden informs him that his wife was killed in a car accident. As a result, he is released 2 days early. Shadow arrives at the airport, but his tickets are pre-booked, and changing them costs much more than he anticipated. At first, he is ready to get angry, but he remembers his prison mate, who had shared a similar story where the released men caused a riot at the airport and ended up back in prison. Shadow agrees to exchange his ticket for a flight the next day and makes himself comfortable in the waiting room due to being short on money. The next day, he notices an elderly man boarding who is acting oddly, and it turns out that the man was just pretending to be in first class. The man introduces himself as Wednesday and offers Shadow a job, which Shadow refuses, as he hopes to get a position at his friend Robbie's gym. Wednesday insists he has no job or prospects other than the one he offers, but Shadow, disliking the brash old man, refuses again. Wednesday falls asleep, and Shadow follows suit, dreaming of a dried-up forest from which a bison emerges with glowing eyes. He is awoken by a stewardess, realizing he is the last passenger on the plane. Due to bad weather, the plane lands in a nearby town, and Shadow takes a car to get home. On the way, he stops at a bar where he meets Wednesday again, who informs him that his best friend Robbie was also killed in the same car accident as his wife. Frustrated, Shadow agrees to a game of hide and seek with Wednesday, who promises that if Shadow loses, he will take the job with him. Shadow flips a coin, but a man, claiming to be a leprechaun, intercepts it and shows Shadow some tricks with the coin, forcing him to fight. Shadow refuses, but Sweeney doesn't stray far, commenting on Wednesday's offer to be his bodyguard and warning him that the old man is a crook. Wednesday buys Shadow a drink to seal their agreement, and Shadow gives in, agreeing as long as Wednesday helps him attend his wife's funeral and pays him at least $2,000 a week, while reserving the right to leave him if he grows bored. Sweeney continues performing tricks, pulling gold coins from thin air and offering to reveal the secret if Shadow fights him. Shadow again refuses, and Sweeney insults Shadow's wife. At this point, Shadow punches Sweeney in the face, and a fight ensues. Shadow wakes up in Wednesday's car, remembering everything, and when he sees the leprechaun's gold coin in his hand, he ties himself up in a roadside bathroom before heading to Laura's funeral. At the church, he sits with Robbie's wife, who informs him that Shadow's wife and Robbie were not just together in the car, but were having an affair. After the funeral, Shadow is alone at his wife's grave, expressing all his thoughts about her behavior. He tells her how he read 1 book a day for all 3 years to become worthy of her and tosses a coin on her grave, which mysteriously sinks into the dirt. Unbeknownst to him, Robbie's wife finds him intoxicated by the drugs she offers him, seeking revenge on the cheaters right on their graves. Shadow brings her to her senses and heads home, but on the side of the road, he spots a strange object. When he puts it on his face like a mask, he finds himself in a virtual space with a boy named Technical Boy, who demands to know about Wednesday. Shadow denies knowing anything, and Technical Boy orders his men to kill him. Shadow manages to free himself from the mask, but the men continue to beat him and attempt to lynch him. The noose breaks, and Shadow is freed while the men are killed by an unknown assailant. Shadow later confronts Wednesday, asking about the attack by Technical Boy, but Wednesday convinces him to continue working for him. The two then travel to Chicago and visit an apartment owned by 3 sisters and a slaughterhouse worker named Chernobog, who angrily orders them to leave. However, Wednesday persuades Chernobog to talk, as he needs him to join them for some reason. Later, Chernobog plays checkers with Shadow on a bet. If Shadow wins, Chernobog agrees to go with them, but if Shadow loses, Chernobog will kill him with his cattle hammer. Shadow loses and goes to sleep. He suddenly hears footsteps, follows them, and finds the youngest sister, Zoria Vetchernaya, on the roof. She asks him to kiss her and gives him the moon in the form of a silver dollar. Shadow wakes up in bed, realizing it was all a dream. They play checkers again, and this time, Shadow wins, forcing Chernobog to agree to go with them when needed. Later, the couple discusses Jesus, and Wednesday tells Shadow that Jesus isn't just one man, but a figure represented by thousands of people across different nationalities, like the Mexican Jesus who came to America illegally. They later meet Sweeney at a cafe, who demands that Shadow return his lucky coin. Shadow reveals that he threw the coin on Laura's grave, so Sweeney digs up Laura's grave but finds it empty. Shadow enters the motel room and meets Laura there. Laura climbs out of the grave, sees a bright light in the distance, walks toward it, and finds her husband hanged in an unexplained way. She gains strength, destroys her enemies, and cuts the rope. Without revealing herself, she returns to Robbie's house, ties herself up as best as she can, and is constantly reminded of her husband. She is then caught by her lover's wife, who initially screams in horror but gradually gets used to the situation and tells Laura that Shadow knows all about her strange death. Robbie's wife then sews Laura's arm back on. Later, Laura confesses her love for Shadow and realizes she is forced to follow him. She shares this with him in a motel room, but Shadow struggles to believe what is happening. Laura kisses him, and he feels her heartbeat as if she is still alive. She tells him that she will keep an eye on him because he is involved in strange adventures. At that moment, Wednesday knocks on his door, and Shadow is ready to answer his questions, but police cars show up at the motel, arresting the couple for Wednesday's bank robbery. Meanwhile, Sweeney finds Laura again and tries to retrieve his coin, discovering it is inside her, giving her life. The leprechaun admits that he was hired by Wednesday to fight and warns Shadow not to trust him in prison. Shadow tries to uncover who his employer is and why he is so afraid that he is forced to flee, but the new gods of the modern world arrive. Technical Boy apologizes for trying to kill Shadow, and Mr. World offers Wednesday an alliance, promising to help him gain fame by sending a missile called Odin to attack North Korea, making his name globally famous. The new gods kill the cops and let Shadow and Wednesday escape. Shadow questions what he saw at the police station and confesses to Wednesday that Laura has come back to life. They return to the motel, but Laura is not in her room. Wednesday recalls the stalking, and they leave without noticing Laura, who is found again by Sweeney. He intends to help resurrect her so she can return his lucky coin, and Jesus will help with that. The pair sets out on the road, and at this time, Shadow becomes bothered by the wound he received, and Wednesday heals him with his mercenary skills, astonishing him. He later takes Shadow to his old friend Vulcan, who controls a small town through the residents' belief in the right to bear arms. Vulcan agrees to side with Wednesday and forges him a sword, but later betrays them by revealing their whereabouts to the new gods. In retaliation, Wednesday kills him with his shackled sword and curses Vulcan's followers by urinating in the vat of boiling metal where Vulcan's body had fallen. Meanwhile, Sweeney and Laura are on the trail of Wednesday and Shadow. The leprechaun confesses that he is participating in Wednesday's war to atone for his desertion as a soldier. At this point, Laura sees a rabbit under the wheels, swerves the truck, and overturns it. Sweeney's lucky coin falls out of her body. The leprechaun looks at her dead body and recalls a past accident he was involved in. He then returns the coin to Laura, rather than taking it back. Meanwhile, Wednesday and Shadow arrive at the tailor's to order costumes, and Shadow is seething with anger, unsure of what is happening to him, why Wednesday killed his friend, and how Laura could rise from the dead. He dreams of a mountain of human skulls and encounters the bison with glowing eyes again. But instead of providing answers, Wednesday takes him to his old acquaintance. Upon entering the house, Shadow is struck by the beauty and harmony inside, and Wednesday reminds him that it is Easter. Shadow looks around at the strange guests and then sees the lady of the house, Easter, and immediately falls under her spell. A man with a halo over his head greets him and assures him that Shadow knows him. Wednesday reminds him that to believe is to see, and as Shadow looks around again, he realizes the old gods are all around him, and the man with the halo is Jesus, representing all the Christs from different religions. Easter meets Shadow, and he makes a pleasant impression on her. Wednesday asks for her support in the coming war, but the goddess has no intention of getting involved. Wednesday reminds her that the old gods have been forgotten by mankind, and it was Jesus who caused this by diverting all attention to himself. Jesus, overhearing this, feels uncomfortable. Easter takes Wednesday inside, accusing him of disrespecting Jesus, but Wednesday insists that he is superior to any god. He also reveals that the new gods killed Vulcan, so his side needs Easter's power to make people pray to her again. Meanwhile, Laura and Sweeney arrive at Easter's manor to find Shadow. Shadow sees Jesus sitting on the surface of the pool and asks how to begin believing. Jesus suggests believing in the senses. Meanwhile, Wednesday persuades Easter to make people remember her and begin praying to her again, and she feels the presence of a dead woman in the house. Sweeney asks for Easter's help in resurrecting Laura. The goddess examines Laura and discovers that she cannot be resurrected because she was killed by a god. Laura forces Sweeney to confess that Wednesday orchestrated both her death and Shadow's imprisonment to bring him into the fold. At this time, the new gods arrive at Easter's house. She denies helping Wednesday, but she is threatened, and Wednesday steps forward. He argues that the old gods inspired people to accomplish great things, whereas the new gods only offer a pretty picture. Mr. World, leader of the new gods, reminds them that the new gods have all the powers of progress. Wednesday uses lightning to destroy the new god's servants, proclaims himself Odin, and convinces Easter to use her powers to take away the spring, causing a drought. Easter steps forward, raises her hands, and the planet goes dark as plants wither and disappear into the ground. Mr. World announces the beginning of the war. After witnessing this, Shadow finally recognizes faith in the gods. This series, adapted from Neil Gaiman's cult science fiction novel, explores the controversial topic of old gods who demanded much from people, while the new gods aim to control something seemingly unimportant, human time. The protagonist's journey is an attempt to understand what values humanity follows today, and I have to admit, it's pretty exciting.